Tim Durling back on the podcast. He's got a new book out now. It's right here called Red on Black, and Tim's showing it as well. A listener's guide to Sammy Hagar. Tim, good to see you again, man.
It is great to be on here again, Eric. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all the great things you've said about the book. Like, it's been, we've been talking about doing this for a long time, and I'm glad we're actually getting to talk about the book itself.
Yeah, my pleasure. And you were on the Waboritas podcast, the Sammy Hagar podcast. So it was great to hear you on there. And also Ultimate Classic Rock has you listed as a must-purchase book. How about that?
Oh, man. First of all, yeah, the Waboritas guys are fantastic. I mean, it's just like talking, sitting around with a couple of your buds. I mean, the fact that we can riff back and forth with lyrics to obscure Hagar songs, that did a lot for me. But yeah, having Ultimate Classic Rock, Matt Wardlaw, I've been chatting back and forth with him, and he emailed me. He said, "Hey man, just want to let you know you made this list," and it was just such an honor because, I was chatting with my wife about it, and she said, "Just so I understand, like, this is a big deal." I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "Ultimate Classic Rock. I mean, they're syndicated radio. The rock station in our area, the closest rock station is a UCR station." And I said, most of the time, if me and the boys on our chats are sending musical information back and forth, it's an Ultimate Classic Rock article. So I was in one once before. Nick Turiso was kind enough he posted an excerpt from my Kansas book, but to have my book recommended among some fantastic rock reads, and just one of them is just such an honor. And I look at it, and I think every self-publisher goes through this. You look at it, yeah, but it's just me. I'm not like the rest of them. But hey, it's out of my hands, right?
Yeah. Trying to remember that you're right though. The other books on that list, it's like, boy, you're in good company.
Yeah, it's pretty.
The MC5 book was Brad Talinsky and Jan Uhelski, who were on this podcast to promote the MC5 book. You're on the list with that book, which is very impressive. Yeah, you're on a website that is a go-to website. And like me, you became a fan of Sammy through Van Halen, same exact album that I became a fan through 5150. So talk about that. Spring of 86, the moment you became a fan of Sammy Hagar.
Yeah, I mean, I was born in 74, and I've always loved music, but it was, it was probably around, it was sometime in 84 when I really started paying attention to the top 40 radio stations. And, you listen to your music you want to listen to, not necessarily music your parents listen to, or music that's just on in the kitchen when you're getting ready for school, and music videos were becoming a thing at this point. I mean, music videos have been around, but in my area, we were starting to see a little bit more of them. And just, 84 into 85 into 86, it was just, I didn't realize it at the time, Eric, but I was learning. I didn't look at it as learning, but I was taking in all this information. Who sang what songs? What are their names? Where are they from? Things like that. And so I was glued to the radio. When I'd get home from school, I'd have the radio on. It was, I'd sleep with it on. I can't imagine sleeping with the radio on because I need white noise. I need a fan going. You know what I mean? I can't imagine. Because subconsciously you're waiting for the song to finish and then another song starts. But anyway,
a good Van Halen song, which is pretty much every Van Halen song, will keep you awake. You will not fall asleep to
this. This is a long-winded answer, but I definitely remember the day that I heard "Why Can't This Be Love" for the first time. So I knew who Van Halen was because of the 1984 videos, right? I'd seen those videos. I'd seen California Girls, Just a Gigolo. So. And I knew David left Van Halen, and they had this new singer coming in, whatever. Just hearing bits and pieces on Kasem and Rick Dees. But I heard "Why Can't This Be Love" come on, and I didn't know what it was or who it was. I didn't know if it was a new song, old song. I just knew I liked it, and I just knew that who's the singer? This guy can sing anything and make it sound cool. This is excellent. And I was hooked. Like by the time the second chorus was rolling around, I'm in. I'm there, right? So DJ back sold the song after it got done. "Why Can't This Be Love?" Brand new song from Van Halen. And at that moment, something crystallized. It said, "Oh, that's Van Halen." That was my entry point, right there. And I was listening for everything new that came out after that. And then, a couple years time, 88, I started buying the albums in earnest. And by the end of 88, I had all of them. So it was, yeah, I can still remember that first time hearing that song. And it's, probably one of my all-time favorite songs by anybody still to this day. To me, it's just one of those bulletproof songs that doesn't matter. It comes on the radio, crank it,
I'm with you on that. I know there are a lot of Van Halen fans, the Dave era fans, that they hate the song, or they just don't get anything out of it at best. But I think it's really Martin Popoff, a mutual friend. Yep. He talked about, it's one of those pop songs that's smart. It's a smartly written song.
Oh yeah, it's the arrangement is not like it doesn't follow really any formula. I mean, it's got a scatting solo in it,
right? Like, it's not paint by numbers.
No,
it's not by design.
It's got the synths in it, but the synths drive the song, and the melody line is unbelievable. I understand. I understand that the timeline is everything. When you get into a band, you can't help when you discover a band. All you can do with it is hopefully you go back if there's a history. And I did. I always go back when I get into a band. But there was just something about that era, the fact that it was coming out when I was really gaining a love for music. I mean, honestly, the band that is the reason I have all these albums behind me is Bon Jovi. 86 was the same year Slippery When Wet came out. So that was a big year for me. That was when it wasn't enough for me to tape the songs off the radio onto blank cassettes anymore. I needed to own the albums. I needed to own all the albums that I could get my hands on. So yeah, it was a pivotal year. So that was just one of those songs that came out in that time period that it still takes me right back. And when I hear Dreams, that takes me back to that summer. So I remember hearing that song Dreams. All over the radio in the summer.
Summer nights.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole album is just the title track to 5150. Yeah. Yeah. So by the way, New Jersey from Bon Jovi to me is their best.
Me too.
I love New
Jersey. That's the first album I waited to get when it first came out, like anticipating, when it came out. But I'm getting off topic here. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I've really tried to look at it in a philosophical way, because there's, the people that don't like Sammy, they don't just not like his music. They just don't like him. The mere mention of his name sets people off. And I don't get it, but I understand not liking the music that they made together, because it took me a long, long time to come to the conclusion that they really were two different bands, with the same name. Two fantastic bands, but two completely different approaches to songwriting. And I love the early stuff. Fair Warning's one of my favorite albums by anybody. Love that album to death. And I tried to look at it, in that way. It's like, well, if I was already into this band, would I like the Sammy era as much? I don't know. I will say that they're one of very few bands that were able to replace their singer and keep going. I mean, that's usually it. You're done. You're playing the state fairs. I'm sorry, you've lost your voice of the band.
Yeah.
You've lost,
and then you're waiting for the original singer to come back.
Yeah, and David Lee Roth wasn't just anyone, right? He was such a personality. So I get it. I get it. But what I don't get is the continued, bad vibes. It's like Sammy's just doing his thing, man. Like he laughing all the way to the bank. I mean, but people just can't stand that he's out there. And every time he says something, like you can read in the comments, man. Just so recently, him talking about wanted to make peace with Alex.
Yep.
Oh, he wants to weasel his way back into the band. No, exactly. There is no band to weasel your way back into. It's over. He wants to be friends with a guy again. He spent 10 years working with him, and it was a successful partnership. But anyway, we're all over the place. Needless to say, Why Can't This Be Love? And I was hooked.
Yeah, and then when you went back to invest in Sammy's solo catalog, wasn't easy getting the Capitol Records era Sammy stuff.
It was a struggle. Yeah, it was a real struggle. See,
pre-internet, streaming services, being able to exchange records online with somebody through emails or whatever.
Yeah. I never had any pen pals or anything like that. I was on the East Coast of Canada, which was never a stronghold for Sammy. I didn't, pre-internet, pre-license, you know what I mean? I was a kid. just trying to, basically rely on local stores, and local stores that carried new albums you just weren't going to see those original Capitol albums. What you did see, and what I did end up getting at first, and I talk about it in the books, are what I call truck stop tapes. The record company issued comps that they would put out that were just thrown together with really cheap looking cover. And famously, there's one that doesn't even spell his name right, spells it with 2 G's.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
The Cruisin' and Boozin' cassette. It's I got a picture of it in here, but I didn't have that version to right here. This lovely high class, song titles down the sides.
Yeah.
But there is a version of this where Hagar is spelled with 2 G's. You go on Discogs, you'll find it. Like that.
That one on the left is one my older brother had.
This one here?
Yeah, that's the best
Turn Up
of
the Music.
Yeah, isn't that the best of, or is that the act? Yeah,
it's called Turn Up the Music. All it is the picture from Danger Zone.
Right.
And then there's this one, Red Hot, which is the very first thing I found from Sammy. That's live. That's like half of that is like All Night Long and half is live 1980. But I got to say, it did the trick at the time. Otherwise, it would have been a long, long time before I heard any of those early songs. And
those songs are the good stuff from, because it's hot and cold, which we'll get into, but the good stuff is really sticking with me now. Like Urban Gorilla, I listen to.
Oh, that's an awesome song. What a cool song.
If you like Montrose, then you like that song.
Yep. Yeah.
But before Montrose, before Montrose, this is the craziest thing. He was in it's like a Simon and Garfunkel type of thing, a duo, Samson and Hagar.
Yeah.
And this isn't noted in the book before you get to Montrose.
Yeah, I can't remember. I wish I could. But my early days of being on the internet, there was a Sammy Hagar fan site. And I cannot remember what it was called. It may have been a GeoCities. It was very well done, and it was very informative. There was a lot of things I didn't know, including the fact that Sammy cut this single in, I think, 1968 with this guy named, last name was Sampson. So yeah, they were like Sampson. Pete, they were like an acoustic duo. It sounds nothing like Sammy Hagar that we all know. So he would have been 20, 21 years old at this point. And yeah, that was his first recording. It was not a good story
to tell about that.
It was on Ranwood Records, which
Records
came and went, never heard of it, never will. But yeah, it's pretty wild that, he ended up some, way different than, I'm just looking it up now. Ranwood Records was founded by Lawrence Welk. So that should tell you what sort of, what sort of music you've got, like
Lawrence Welk was a headbanger.
Exotic guitars, the Tennessee Ernie Ford. So easy listening stuff, right? And somewhere in the middle of all this is this one single for Samson and Hagar. I think it's called "Come or Try to Find Me."
Reach out to find me.
Yeah. You find a clip of it on YouTube. One single, it's even it's credited. If you find this, there's no singles on sale. B-side's called "Read My Thoughts," but the A side, "Reach Out to Find Me," it's credited to Pete Sampson and Sam Hagar.
Hagar.
Yeah, which I believe that's what he was named on the first Montrose album too, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, let's get to that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Sammy and Van Halen, their worlds are actually colliding from a very early time, as far back as 73, because Ted Templeman and Don Landee are the engineers on the debut Montrose album. And of course they did the first 6 Van Halen albums with Dave, but then there's also that story that possibly Warner Brothers was thinking, let's get that guy from, because Ted Templeman had already worked with Sammy. So that they're thinking maybe we'll get Sammy in to replace Dave, because things aren't really working out with Dave in the studio with vocals. And there was all of that, but then there's some of the obscure stuff, like Van Halen playing "Make It Last" from that Montrose album during the club days. So,
I love that. I love the fact that you can find that it's not a great recording, but Dave I love Dave. Dave's Dave. But Dave famously said, every night Sammy Hagar is going to go up there and sing my songs, and I'll never sing a Sammy Hagar song. Well, you did. You did.
You did.
So
During
he was
obviously
a fan of that first Montrose set. Yeah, it's so weird how they were, those two entities were like, in each other's, in and around each other's orbit. It was almost inevitable that, I got to say that the course of history turned out the way it did. I'm glad that they stuck with Dave, obviously, because you wouldn't have had those classic Van Halen albums, right? But it's an interesting side note. And that Montrose album, I got to say that what put me onto that Red Hot cassette I was telling you about, I didn't know. It just had a bunch of songs on it that I'd never heard of before, except for I've Done Everything for You, which I was so confused by that. So I'm like, that's Rick Springfield. I knew that much. So I'm like, what's going on? And there's no information. I had no way of finding these things out. It was just the song titles. There they are. It's like, tough. But on that album, there was Space Station Number 5 and Bad Motor Scooter. And I found out those were Montrose songs because I got this Hit Parader magazine that came out in 1989. I can picture it. It's got a blue cover. It was the top 100 metal albums of all time. You can find it on eBay. I thought about getting it, but I know it inside out. But it's got Robert Plant on the cover and James Hetfield and a bunch of people. And somewhere in that top 100, there was this album called Montrose, which first few times I read the magazine, I just skimmed over it. It was just like a half-page article. It was somewhere in the 60s, I think. There was a picture of Ronnie Montrose with a weird-looking guitar, and he had like a headset on, so I didn't really think anything of it. And then I was flipping the pages one day, and I thought I saw the word Hagar. And so I read the little blurb on it, and it said something about the first recordings of a young Sammy Hagar and songs like Space Station Number 5 and Bad Motor Scooter. So I'm like, okay, well, there's something else I got to look for. And now, since that was on Warner and was a fairly successful album over time, I managed to find that cassette in summer '89. And I mean, before I knew how critically acclaimed that album was, I loved it. I'm like, this is great. Like, this is fantastic. This is 1973. It sounds so ahead of its time. It's so well produced. And because cassettes were the way they were, I didn't even know Ted Templeman produced it for a long time, but it made sense. But it's so full and high fidelity, like for a 73 album, I'd stack that up against anybody's album. I mean, it sounds better than, everybody talks about how great the early Queen albums sound, and they do. I think that Montrose album sounds better. It's crystal clear.
And the question is, why didn't it do more than it did? Because it was a flop, let's face it, but it gained notoriety over time.
It really was, and that's why there was a panic, and that's why Paper Money is much lighter, and it's nowhere near as focused and hard rocking as that debut. I have a theory on the Montrose album, and I've shared this with people. And it's no fault of the guys. I'm sure it was a record company decision, but I will say to people, look, don't let that album cover throw you off, because it's not a particularly hard rock looking album cover, right?
No, and Sammy, he's looking down.
You can barely tell it's him, even if you know that he's in the band. Half his face,
it's Ronnie Montrose front and center. It's his band.
Yeah, but they could have just, what they should have done is they could have just gone with a logo, because they kind of had a cool logo. They could have just had that on, just a stark background. But no, instead you get this, I don't even know. But
yeah, it's like, what do we make of this? Yeah. But is this rock? Is this, I don't know.
And Ted Templeman said this in his autobiography that Greg Renoff did. I talked to Greg too. Greg was kind enough to do the foreword for this book, which was an honor. But Ted even said there was I should have pushed harder for a single. There's not really any one song on Montrose that I could picture hearing on the radio in 73. It was really heavy for 73. It's really good, but you needed a hit single. You needed a Smoke on the Water. You needed Schools Out. You needed something to latch onto.
And if you want to know why they released You Really Got Me as their first single, the answer is the Montrose debut album, because Ted Templeman said, if we only had a single. So he knew he wanted to lead with something that people were going to already recognize. already established as a hit, so there's a better chance of this being a hit. I know Edward and I don't know what about the rest of the band, but Edward wasn't happy that that was going to be the debut single, but it worked.
It worked, and let's fast forward ahead a few years, 1978. Yeah, okay, You Really Got Me only peaked at number 36, but that's a heavy song for 1978. If you look at any Billboard chart, yeah, there were rock songs on there. There was Foreigner, and there were Boston and bands like that. But You Really Got Me's jagged, loud guitar, and they supercharged that. I mean, they made that song their own, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that's one of the handful of early Van Halen songs I remember hearing on the radio. But before I really got into the band, I don't think I knew it was a cover.
Not a lot of people did. The younger audience didn't. Yeah, the ones who were just maybe in their teens in the late 70s, that was the joke. Like Dave Davies talked about after a show, somebody came up to him and said, "Boy, you guys did a great cover of Van Halen's You Really Got Me." This was like in 1979 or something,
Yeah. I mean, the music business is like that. I have always wondered too. I mean, I like it on the album, on the Montrose album, but I wonder if that's why the cover of Good Rockin' Tonight is on.
Yeah, that's on there.
But
yeah, that kicks off side 2.
Yeah.
And it's a good version of the song. I mean,
excellent version. Great solo from Ronnie.
Yeah, the songs, every song I love on this, the ones that get the most notoriety are Rock the Nation, Bad Motor Scooter, Space Station number 5, and of course, Rock Candy, Make It Last. But the other ones, like I Don't Want It, One Thing on My Mind, those are great songs too. The whole thing, you just listen to it start to finish. Yeah.
And if you think about it, yeah, you've got Ted Templeman and Don Landy. It's on Warner Brothers. Band's named after the guitar player. And it's a very American style of what would have been called heavy metal then, but really hard rock. It had none of the European. It didn't have any of the Sabbath or the Purple, Uriah Heep. It didn't have any of the sort of the gothic overtones, like the minor key stuff. Van Halen's first album was very much like that. It was loud and aggressive and powerful, but yet it was positive. Like they were happy to be there. Like Dee Snider called it happy metal. When he talked about hair metal bands in the 80s, like these are bands that smiled in pictures. So yeah, I that first Montrose album, I mean, tons of people have covered songs from it. It was a real sleeper hit. I think it took 4 years to certify gold. Eventually it went platinum, and thankfully it's an album that's continually been made available in stores so that hopefully younger generations can discover it, right?
Hagar is the sole songwriter on Bad Motor Scooter, Make It Last. I don't know, we can check on that second album. It's actually right in front of me here. It doesn't have any sole songwriting credits, but there's a point to this that I'm leading into a question for you. But so he's the sole writer on those songs, and then he's a co-writer on I Don't Want It, Space Station number 5. So yeah, he can write songs, yet he goes solo, and it's like almost half the songs on those first few albums are covers.
Just Capitol was just shoveling covers at him. I mean, they were almost marketing him as like a singer-songwriter, middle of the road entertainer type of guy, but he came from Montrose. Like the guy clearly wanted to rock out. And Capitol, I don't know if it's because it wasn't a band, like, 4 or 5 guys with one name, but it's weird. They started throwing all these songs at him. Like, he's covering Van Morrison and
Flamingos Fly.
Yeah. I mean, he's doing yacht rock. Flamingos Fly is yacht rock. So is You Make Me Crazy from Musical Chairs, and his cover of Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. Those are any of those yacht rock stations now that have that as format. You could throw those Sammy songs in there. Nobody would bat an eye. They might not even know who it is without looking. But the point is, yeah, he's perfectly capable of writing his songs, and those songs that he writes are far and away the best songs on those early albums. So yeah, I don't understand why, Capitol certainly, it's not like they didn't have any rock bands. There's certain labels that you hear about not being the greatest at promoting rock bands, RCA and A&M probably being the biggest culprits, but the Capitol was the Beatles label, for crying out loud. They should know how to market a rock band. But yeah, the early Sammy Hagar albums, once I was able to find them and hear them in their entirety, boy, are they a mixed bag of everything. Styles, quality of songs. They're all over the place, right?
Yeah, it's not a record you'd put on and when you're throwing a party and you just put on and leave it on, because it's going to be so uneven that people are going to be wondering, like, what is this? Like, we're Keep on Rocking is the lead track. Urban Gorilla kicks ass, but then you follow with Flamingos Fly. It's like, huh?
Yeah, your best bet if you're going to do that is put on one of his live albums from that era.
Yeah.
Because
check this out: 9 tracks on the first album is 9 on a 10 scale, released in '76. 9 tracks. Covers would be, you got Flamingos Fly, Van Morrison, China, Bob Welch song. You got Confession, Please Come Back, written by Ron Nagel.
Young Girl Blues,
Donovan. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is literally almost half that album.
Yeah. So you really don't get a picture of what Sammy can do completely. You can get a picture of how he can interpret songs. Another weird fact about Sammy's career is that somebody, he was on Capitol Records, so it makes sense, but somebody wanted him to do Night Moves.
Yes, he mentions that in the book Red.
That is so strange. Like, can you imagine? Like that's like Back to the Future, like the timeline gets all thrown off, right?
Yeah, and then years later, when he does Things Have Changed, the breakdown sounds a little bit like Night Moves. Have you ever noticed that?
Well, we'll get to it, but that's not an album that sticks with me. But
imagine him singing Night Moves. Yeah, he thought it was too soft for.
I mean, he did a great version of Ramblin' Gamblin' Man, but that's a rocker to begin with.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just so strange. It's like, why, the fact of the matter is that, yeah, he wrote a lot of those songs on that Montrose album, or co-wrote them. Let the man write, let the man, pen to paper. But yeah, like I said, mixed bag. And you can see the results of it. And you can see that as he got a little bit more successful in these, and I'm talking small increments because none of those Capitol albums have been certified, but you notice once he gets a little bit more control, the albums get harder overall.
You're right. Second album, the Red album, that features Red. That's one of his best songs, and that's early on in the game. 10 tracks on the Red album, and here we go again. There's 4 of them, I think, that are covers. You got Catch the Wind is a cover. Free Money is a cover, I believe. Fillmore Shuffle. Hungry.
Yeah.
And those are the covers there. But he's got sole writing credit. Interesting, you see them as the albums go on. He's got sole writing credit on more tracks. Like this one, he wrote Cruisin' and Boozin', Rock and Roll Weekend, which is another solid song. Love Has Found Me, Little Star Eclipse, which I do like. That's the last. So he's starting to take over as the sole songwriter on that second album. And then we have, the third album is Musical Chairs, which has one of my favorite Sammy songs, Reckless. Sole songwriting credit on that, by the way, right? All the best songs are the ones he writes. Yeah, You Make Me Crazy, he gets sole writing credit on. I don't think we're a fan of You. That's the one that's the yacht rocker, isn't it? You Make Me Crazy.
You Make Me Crazy is totally yacht rock. And that one actually, the weird thing about it is that one actually charted. I think it got to like 77 on Billboard or something like that. But there's a clip from him doing it, I think, it's either on the Midnight Special or the Old Gray Whistle Test.
I've seen it.
Cracks me up. He's got this he's got this white outfit on. It's got like a tassels on it, not tassels, but like a drawstring or something. His hair's really, really short, like it is, and it just barely looks like him, and it cracks me up. As sometimes if I'm having a bad day at work or something like that, I look that up because I will never not put a smile on my face. And he doesn't even have a guitar in the clip. It's just so strange.
Yeah, it's that voice, man. It's that kick-ass voice. Yeah, that's the thing. And you just love listening to him sing. He can sing anything pretty much. Musical Chairs 77, Street Machine 79, Danger Zone 1980. So those are the last of the Capitol record years. Yeah, he's touted as a triple threat. He can sing, play guitar, and write songs, yet Capitol didn't seem to know what to do with him. But yet then he moves to Geffen.
Yeah.
And this is where we start to see things start to change for him. Oh, we forgot to mention what was funny about the UK. This was a strange statistic. Danger Zone 1980, number 12 in the UK, 85 in the US. So what was going on there? EMI was promoting him, I guess, more than Capitol in the States. So
the best thing I can figure is that Sammy is one of those American acts, and like you said, we've had Martin Popoff on both of our shows. Martin's been a great help to me as a writer, lots of advice, and he wrote the foreword to my first book. But Martin has said that Sammy Hagar, Y&T, Riot, they were all American acts that were sort of adopted as honorary new wave of British heavy metal artists over in the UK when that scene was getting underway in 79, 80. You can see footage of, why is the name escaping me now? There's a club where Neil Kay, DJ, would play, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, whatever was popular, and there'd be, a bunch of guys there in their jean jackets, and the jean jackets are all covered with patches. They got Motorhead patches, and they got Priest packet.
We're talking in the UK?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, you'll see somebody with a Sammy Hagar patch. So I think that when Sammy would do heavy songs, like by the time you get to Street Machine, he's got songs like Trans Am, which is a great rocker. This Planet's on Fire,
oh yeah,
which is a early speed rocker, really. And then on Danger Zone, he's got Lover Money. He would do some heavier songs, and I think that they really embraced that over there. And I think that there was a lot of love for that Montrose album too. And so, he could go over there, and like that live 1980 album was recorded at the Hammersmith Odeon. Like he could go over there and do quite well, like do 2,000-3,000 seaters as a headliner. I mean, I'm pretty sure that in one of the earliest gigs Def Leppard ever played outside of Sheffield was opening for Sammy Hagar. So
wow,
yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like 70, like I think even before their first album came out, they opened for AC/DC, and they opened some shows for Sammy Hagar, and so that shows you how like he was well known, well respected in the UK, and did a lot better over there than he did in his home country, because I think the label was pushing, was promoting. You can't get to number 12 on the album charts without some push from your label. Yeah. So there's a real divide there. 85 on Billboard. Why? So they just weren't. Something wasn't clicking. I mean, Sammy was doing good in pockets, like
St. Louis. Right,
St. Louis, he would do really well in.
That's where he got the nickname Red Rocker, I think. Didn't somebody?
Yeah, I think the kids.
Somebody read an article.
Red Rocker.
Yeah, because somebody, it was in a headline, I think.
Yeah,
and then somebody.
And it became his forever nickname, right? Right. And he would do well in like San Antone, and but pockets, not he couldn't do a full scale headline tour, right? In his own country. So yeah, really, I would think it would not surprise me if back in the day, especially before we had the internet, if people thought Standing Hampton was his first album, because those Capitol albums were just so under the radar.
Which Standing Hampton would be the first under Geffen Records, 1982. Yep. First to go platinum.
Yeah.
5 singles on there. They charted in either the mainstream rock chart or pop singles chart. And that's Babies on Fire, Can't Get Loose, I'll Fall in Love Again, the cover of Janis Joplin's Piece of My Heart, and then, of course, the classic There's Only One Way to Rock. What's the difference maker with Geffen? What did they do that Capitol didn't do?
Well, it's interesting because it's not as if his music changed wholesale, making that switch. Because, I mean, he may have delivered an album like Standing Hampton or some of those songs for whatever his next Capitol album might have been. We're only talking a year's difference, right? Danger Zone came out in 1980. Standing Hampton, it's dated 1981, was released in early 82, which is a huge pet peeve of mine. When
it's in the book,
when the date, I have to talk about that. My OCD is just like 1984 is like that too. If you look at it, it says 1983, but it's not. My opinion is you should always err on the side of caution and give it the next year. But it wasn't that long, it wasn't that big amount of time. I think what Geffen did was maybe there may have been a directive, like John David Kolodner is the well-known A&R guy at Geffen. I mean, he resurrected Aerosmith and Whitesnake. I mean, you've seen him in the Aerosmith videos. He's big guy with the big beard, you know, and he always cameos. He's the judge in the Can't Drive 55 video. That's his that's his appearance in the Sammy video. There may be more, but I think the directive might have been, don't, you know, no more flamingos fly. You know what I mean? No more chase the wind, no more catch the wind. We need you to write rock songs, radio-friendly rock songs. And that's what he ended up doing. But it's not like he wasn't delivering songs like that to Capitol. Case in point is I've Done Everything for You. That came out in 1978. It's on his first live album, but it was also released as a standalone single, a studio version, which makes no sense. And this is, again, bad decision-making on Capitol's part. They really should have waited till there was an album to attach it to. The fact that Rick Springfield 3 years later had a top 10 single with it shows that he was capable of writing these types of songs. He had songs like Plain Jane, which got a little bit of airplay, but they weren't hits. So he was commercially minded like that. It wasn't like he wanted to make heavy rock, but they, you know, told him to wimp out to get on the radio. He's just an upbeat guy. Those are the kinds of songs that he writes. And I think Geffen just let him do what he did best. And that's how you get I'll Fall in Love Again and Can't Get Loose and all these cool songs. And of course, there was a bigger budget involved. There had to have been a bigger budget involved because sonically, the Geffen albums just sound better. They got the late Keith Olsen to produce Standing Hampton and Three Lock Box. And that's another thing that may have made a difference with those Capitol albums. I mean, if Ted Templeman had still been working with them, or if they'd gotten somebody like, I don't know, Jack Douglas or Mike Stone, or, you know, a producer's producer. He had John Carter working with him in the beginning, and then he produced himself, but he needed somebody to say, that's pretty good, but that bridge needs a little work, you know, just to fine tune those songs. His songwriting acumen was there. He was capable of writing hit singles, but he just wasn't on a label that knew what to do with them. So they were, you know, they kind of didn't go to waste. They're there to enjoy, but they didn't do what they were, you know, songs like those should have done. Whereas almost immediately he signs to Geffen. The album goes gold within its initial, you know, life, eventually goes platinum. I'll Fall in Love Again goes all the way to 43, which is by far the most successful single he'd ever had at that point. And There's Only One Way to Rock became a concert staple. He brought that with him into Van Halen. I mean, the first time I ever heard There's Only One Way to Rock was when I saw Live Without a Net. And I didn't realize at that time that wasn't a Van Halen song. So it kind of became an honorary Van Halen song. So I think with Geffen, there was a bigger budget and there was more attention paid to, you know, what's going to sound good on FM radio, what's going to have that possible crossover appeal. And they had a guy that was more than willing to not play the game, but he just naturally wrote in that commercial rock vein, which I love. So there's a reason those Geffen albums, and plus the just distribution, they got them on the store shelves. They were by far the easiest ones for me to get when I first started to get into Sammy's solo albums. You find those 4 Geffen albums, no problem. It was everything else that was hard to find.
Pretty cool album cover too for Standing Hampton. It's like
very clever and very
Pink Floyd like.
Yeah.
Very Storm Thorgerson.
Yeah, it's not a Hypnosis cover, but it looks like it might have been. If you want to see, Sammy did work with Hypnosis. The Red Album and Musical Chairs are both Hypnosis covers.
Yeah.
Musical Chairs is a very strange album cover, and I've often wondered if that was initially meant for somebody else. But the Red Album it's just the funny idea is, well, let's just have everything on it red. But yes, his album covers did improve once he got on Geffen too. You could tell a little bit more money was spent.
Yeah, what a difference it makes though with the producer Keith Olsen, because Sammy talked about how Keith really pushed him to really make sure that every track is solid. Whereas before he might have rushed through albums if he felt he had enough good songs. It was just like, we got enough, let's get on the road.
Well, the recording budget might have run out.
Right.
And be like, look, I think 6 of these songs are good. I'll just throw 4 more on here, maybe do a couple of covers and send it to the factory and let's hit the road. So,
and as we keep score of the Soul Hagar songwriting credit songs here, right? I'll Fall in Love Again. There's Only One Way to Rock. Baby's on Fire. Can't Get Loose. All his songs, soul songwriting credit. On side 2, Baby It's You. Inside Looking In. Soul songwriting credit. Tell me about heavy metal. Jim, is that's the guy from Survivor?
Yeah, Jim Peterick. Yeah,
Peterick. Yeah,
that's an interesting. That's an interesting song because there's 2 versions of it. I think a lot of like diehard fans know that if you get the heavy metal soundtrack, it's on. I think it's the first song on the album, but immediately you can tell it's a different recording than the Standing Hampton version. It's not just a different mix; it's a whole different recording. It's the same song, but it's a different take. I think Roy Thomas Baker produced the album, the soundtrack version. That's one thing that I love when Universal put that Essential Red collection out in 2004, and we'll get to it, but because they collected those soundtrack songs up, but I really wish they put that version of heavy metal on there so it was all in one place.
Yeah, he's had some great soundtrack songs. Fast on the Ridgemont High.
Winner Takes It All.
Winner Takes It All. Girl Gets Around from Footloose.
Yeah.
He seemed to know how to write a good song for a movie soundtrack. He seemed to know how that worked. Like Winner Takes It All is like it's like that could have been a Rocky IV song.
I'm such a sucker for those types of songs anyway. I mean, Winner Takes It, Survivor, Burning Heart, I love that stuff. It just almost makes me want to exercise,
right. That you could see the montage scene of Rocky in the snow.
I remember hearing Winner Takes It All on the radio. It only peaked at 52, but it was probably not promoted that heavily because it was on a Columbia soundtrack. But
and who knew Sammy could beat Sylvester Stallone in an arm wrestling match?
Well, I love the fact that the video fades out. You don't really. It's pretty cool though. I mean, he was. I think at one point he was thinking about being a boxer, and his dad was a boxer.
Sure. Oh yeah. That's right. I forgot. I thought he wins in the video, but they fade out.
I think it fades out, and you can't really.
I think we could assume Sly had the.
I love the fact that there's one point where he's got a tank top and like gray sweatpants on or something, and the hair's everywhere, and he's like jumping up and down and pounding on the table. But he was almost like a junior Kenny Loggins when it came to being on soundtracks, because he's also on the song Bad Reputation, which is from Danger Zone. That's on the soundtrack of a movie called Up the Academy, which is affiliated with Mad Magazine. My only knowledge of that is because that song's on the soundtrack. And also I'll Fall in Love Again 4 years later ended up on Vision Quest, which was a Geffen soundtrack. So and it's the B-side of Journey's Only the Young.
Yeah. And did you have in the book Sammy songs that others recorded, like Red was recorded by Bette Midler?
That was one of my favorite parts of doing the book, because each solo album gets a chapter. And at the end of the chapter, I put, covers and other recordings that are associated from that period that aren't linked to anything else. Like, for example, when I talk about VOA 1984, at the end of that chapter, I talk about The Girl Gets Around from Footloose, because it's the same year. So one of my favorite things was looking at the songs that either Sammy wrote and other artists ended up recording, or where the original versions of some of the songs that Sammy covered on his albums came from, just so give people something else to look for and go, well, I wonder what this version sounds like. So yeah, you mentioned Bette Midler. How that happened, I don't know, because she covered 2 of his songs. She covered Red, and she covered Keep on Rockin', which Keep on Rockin' is on her soundtrack to The Rose, which I think that was a pretty big movie. So he probably made some money off of that soundtrack by her covering his song. And the wild thing, there's another version of Red by a guy named Johnny Hallyday, who was a French rock and roller. He's passed away now, but he had somebody rewrite the lyrics. So it's called Guerre, which means war. And it's heavy, but he's singing in French. It's the music to Red. I'm on YouTube looking at it. I'm like, this is pretty good.
Yeah, this might be the funnest part of each chapter.
Yeah, really. There's a Dutch band that recorded a version of Red, and then Van Morrison did end up the funny thing is Van Morrison wrote Flamingos Fly for Sammy, is my understanding, but then he eventually recorded a version of it himself on one of his own albums. So yeah, the stuff people would never, like names you would not associate with anything to do with Sammy Hagar. These are people that ended up recording these songs. I mean, obviously in more recent years, Megadeth did a version of This Planet's on Fire, and I think Sammy's on that version. So yeah, I mean, you know, Iron Maiden covered I Got the Fire twice, once with Paul Di'Anno and once with Bruce Dickinson, and then they also covered Space Station Number 5. I think those are B-sides. So
wow,
yeah,
that's cool.
People have done his songs. Like he's a proven songwriter, but I did want to put those extra things on there just in case people were interested in. And if there were B-sides that didn't appear on an album, I mentioned those too. You know,
all this inside of the book, Red on Black, a listener's guide to Sammy Hagar, out now. Author Tim Durling is on the podcast to talk about the amazing career of the Red Rocker, Sammy Hagar. Let's get the Three Lock Box now. Three Lock Box, you say this is your personal favorite. Why is that?
It's my favorite. Yeah, it's always been from the first time I heard it. There's something about, to me, that's just a perfect 10-song collection of songs. I've just always really, really enjoyed that album, and I think it still holds up really well. And it's one of those cases where I'm really surprised that album never went platinum, because it had a successful, like a pretty big hit off of it. It was on
huge single. Your Love Is Driving Me Crazy.
Yeah, but it's never been certified past gold. I think if it was recertified, it would have to have sold over 1 million by now.
Yeah, how great! Your Love Is Driving Me Crazy. Just that just sums up Hagar's his pop rock sensibility there.
Yeah.
He's able
and that's
to
the type of song that he, you know, if Capitol had been patient, he'd have given that to them, right? He'd have come out with it.
Soul songwriting credit, by the way.
Yeah, number 13 pop hit. I think it hit number 19 in Canada. Curiously, not really a video for it, just a live video, but yeah, just ear candy, man.
I Don't Need Love, one of his most underrated tracks.
Yeah.
Never Give Up is always a great one. That's very Sammy-like, the positive attitude.
Yeah.
And then you have Remember the Heroes, Jonathan Cain of Journey co-wrote.
Yeah, Mike Reno of Loverboy. It's a duet, which I mean, you know, you saw the last tour, right? The Best of All Worlds tour. And
I know where you're going with this.
Loverboy were opening.
Yep.
How cool would that have been if he'd have done that song and Reno had come out and sang it with him?
Would have been great.
Yeah, they sound really good singing together, because I remember listening to that. Of course, I mean, you know, I grew up in Canada. I was a Loverboy fan. And I put Three Lock Box on, and I'm doing something else. And, you know, Sammy sings the first of it and comes back on. All of a sudden I go, that's Mike Reno.
Oh, yeah.
Unmistakably. Like, I go look at the cassette, the little blurb of credits. I'm like, it is Mike Reno.
Yeah. Distinct voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the title track, Three Lock Box. I mean, that's one of his best.
Yeah.
One of his best. Yeah. Yeah. You covered Live 1980. Then we get to VOA, because I think HSAS. No, that came before VOA. So let's talk about that, because that. How did that all come together? That's an interesting.
It's an interesting. That's a funny one. That the Through the Fire album, and that's the one Geffen album that I had a hard time finding because it was out of print. I didn't find that till the early 90s, till I tracked down a used cassette of it. I knew of it, and I knew Sammy had something to do with it, so it was on my radar, but, you know, it was a hard one to find. Yeah, that's a really weird one. That came out early 84, so it's in between Three Lock Box and VOA. And that was Sammy, and, you know, Sammy and Neil Schon go back to, you can find footage of, there's black and white footage of Sammy, I think, from the Fillmore in San Francisco, and Neil comes on and jams because they're Bay Area.
I've seen it.
Right?
Yep,
yeah,
I've seen it.
Good stuff. And of course, Neil, it plays on Love or Money from Danger Zone, great solo to that, and Steve Perry's on that too, actually. So those guys go way back, and they got together and they said, let's just throw a band together, write a bunch of songs, go on this short little tour, play them live, and record an album or something like that. So They got Kenny Aronson on bass, who he was a session guy. He played with, I think at the time he was playing with Billy Squire. He played with a bunch of people. He was originally in a band called Dust, which if you're a really, really super diehard Kiss fan, you'll know the guy that was also in Dust, which is Richie Wise. Richie Wise was the co-producer on the first two Kiss records. And Michael Shreve had been the drummer in Santana, so he knew, Neil, he and Neil played together before, right? So according to the liner notes of the album, from the November 9th to 21st of 83, they went on this, couldn't have been a long tour, and they couldn't have gone very far. They played all of these new songs, these untested songs. 15, I think, were written all together and played. Because you can find
15, that many.
You can find the concert on MTV, and I documented in the chapter all of the songs that didn't end up on the album. There's a deluxe Blu-ray reissue of that needs to happen, but that's another story.
Yeah. How are the other songs?
Well, one of them was originally called Through the Eyes of Love. That was eventually was rewritten slightly, and it became a song called The Love, which is on the Red Voodoo album.
Yeah.
So that song dates back to the HSAS period. That's why Neil's got a songwriting credit on it.
Okay.
So there's In for the Kill, Through the Eyes of Love, Since You Came, or sometimes called Ever Since You Came, Hope and Fear, What Will Never Be, and Tough Enough. Those are all songs that were recorded, and you can see versions of them. They played the whole show on MTV, I guess, back in the day. So they went out and they did these songs, and reportedly they did them live and then took the audience out. I think there's only one song in the album, the closer, My Hometown, that's actually got some applause in it. But it is a very off-the-floor, raw-sounding album, considering what the rest of the Geffen album sounds.
It's like off the soundboard. You don't hear the audience.
Neil's just blistering. Like, you could tell he was really getting into the fact that, okay, I can really, play the way I want to play now. But where I'm going with this, like, Top of the Rock is a really, really good Hagar anthem that wouldn't have sounded out of place on any of the rest of his albums. It actually wouldn't have sounded out of place on a Van Halen album. But the song that I think there was a missed opportunity when in Sammy's autobiography, he said that when they were working on this HSAS album, he had already written I Can't Drive 55, but this wasn't going to be one of those songs. And he said, I wasn't being cagey. I knew this was a song for me. So he was wise enough to keep it, right? I think they should have done the same thing with Missing You, because on a properly promoted Sammy Hagar solo album, that song could have been a massive hit in 1984. That's a fantastic melodic rock song. Fantastic song.
You add that to VOA and you got an even bigger selling.
You could have had easily a top 20 hit, if not more. When you consider the types of songs that were getting on the radio by 1984, for example, you had songs like Panama hitting number 13. You know what I mean? Like, it was opening up. Round and Round by Rat at number 12. Missing You could have been, a huge across the board single, but it was just never going to have the chance, because Geffen were never going to sink that much money into this album, I don't think, because they'd been working so hard to make Sammy happen as a solo artist. It was starting to happen. Plus, Neil was on Columbia Records, was a member of Journey. There's no way they were going to let him moonlight. He's making money for them too. So this was never going to be there was never going to be an HAS2, I don't think. That's just not even a realistic possibility, right? It just wasn't the right time for it. But what we get, when I listen back to it, it's a really interesting album, because it's a mix of songs that, like I said, that could have fit on a Sammy album, maybe could have fit on a Van Halen album. And then there's other songs that are really experimental, like the whole, I call it a suite, the whole Animation, Valley of the Kings, Giza, like the rest of side one. To me, that's practically just one song. I think that it's an odd choice that they made for the one single they put out from this album, and that's the cover of Procol Harum's Whiter Shade of Pale. Now, I say odd, not because it's not good, because it's very good.
Right.
But my argument that I make for it is, like, who did Geffen Records think that they were marketing this album to would have either knew the song or B, liked the song? You know what I mean? mean, at the time, it was a 15-year-old song, and it was quote unquote an oldie, right? It's a
Right.
fantastic song in its original version. It
No,
really,
I hear you. I hear you. As a lead
and
single,
I
Missing
think
You would
that
have been.
yeah, Missing You should have been the single, but I think it's really good. They give it the power ballad treatment. Sammy
Oh,
sings great. Neil does a great job of
his solo.
playing the organ line on guitar. Really well done. But an odd choice for a single. It only hit 94 on the pop chart. So I mean, obviously the public kind of agreed, and it's
And an
got a.
odd band name, HSAS.
I say this in the book. No matter how you slice it, there's nothing catchy about it. Some letters
Right.
have a ring to it together.
Just doesn't roll.
HSAS is like, what does that even say? Now they did come up with a cool logo, but
Yeah.
it's like a legal firm, right? You know,
Yeah.
Hagar, Schoen, Aronson, and Shreve. It's not like Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, where you hear it and you automatically know who each of those guys are. Sammy Hagar, okay, you know who he is. Neil Sean, maybe you know, it's the guitar player from Journey at the time. Aronson and Shreve, you got to be a real music head to know that stuff, right?
Yeah. And didn't Sammy say
Apparently
those guys, they wanted more money
yeah,
and that wasn't going to happen because they didn't have
apparently
the.
the original bass player that was going to be in that band, I didn't know this until recently, was Tom Peterson from Cheap Trick, who
Oh,
wasn't in Cheap Trick at this time.
right. He was out for a while. He was out
Yeah,
from like
so that
80
would
to
have been
87.
interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I think it comes down to who's available at any given time, especially where this seemed to have been thrown together quite quickly. Because Three Lock Box, if we do the timeline, and I think came out in December of 82, he would have toured for most of 83 supporting it, I would think, been in full promo mode. So yeah, there wasn't a lot of time to put this together. So
Had
who's
he already
in the
recorded
studio?
VOA? Had he already
Yeah,
recorded?
and working on his next album proper. So I like the fact that it exists. It makes for an interesting discussion because I still think there's a lot of people that don't know it exists.
Yeah, it's one of those what ifs too. Like, what if they stayed together? And then, of course, they Planet Us years later was another attempt
Well,
at getting
it's
a band
funny.
together
If you
with
think
Neil.
about Chickenfoot could have been HSAS. Hagar, Satriani, Anthony Smith.
Yeah, there you go. Another HSAS.
Yeah.
Let's get to VOA 1984, number 32 album. His most identifiable song, I Can't Try 55.
Yeah.
Swept Away, Two Sides of Love, great tunes. Ted Templeman worked with Sammy again on this one.
Yeah,
He
it's
produced it.
interesting. It's
Yeah.
really interesting. And I'm not 100% sure about this, but this might be the first album that Ted Templeman produced that Don Landy did not engineer because Don stayed on with the Van Halen crew, right? The Van Halen albums would always have these weird credits like recorded by Don Landy. I'd never seen that before. It was either produced or engineered or mixed, but recorded. So which says to me, and I know he did much more than this, but when it says recorded by, to me it's like the guy that goes like this, click,
Right.
stop.
Yeah.
But it was engineered by a guy named Jeff Hendrickson, who started to work with Ted after that. Because if you look in the credits to Aerosmith's Done with Mirrors, Honeymoon Suite, Racing After Midnight, Jeff Hendrickson is the engineer. Sammy gave him a nickname, and I can't remember what it is, but it was funny, very Sammy. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, Ted Templeman worked with Sammy in two band situations and solo, which is pretty amazing.
You talk about Missing You being a song that he should have included on VOA because that would have helped to fill the album out more because it's uneven. It's his most popular album, I guess, because of I Can't Try 55. But
yeah, I've always considered it. The reason this was his first platinum album was 100% I Can't Drive 55. That was just an irresistible song. The video is a lot of fun. And he even says, I saw an interview with him once where he says, that's a career song for me. It was not my highest charting song, but it was by far the one that had the most impact. The day after that video premiered, all of a sudden people recognized me.
The staying power that he just played it at halftime at the Las Vegas Raiders game, that and Right Now.
Yeah.
The staying power of that track has really served him well as a solo artist.
But sure. I think, and this is just my opinion, the Bogus Otis guys weren't quite with me on it, but I think the album's very top heavy. I think side one is vastly superior to side two. I think side two's got some real clunkers on it. And it's only got 8 songs on it, which is weird for an album that came out in 1984. It's almost like it was missing a couple of songs.
You're right, 8 tracks. I think the
Yeah.
only song I really like on side 2, and it's a really good song, is the title track. Voice
Yeah,
of America
and
is good.
that's, I agree with you. I don't think that would pass muster today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's pretty charged lyrically, but I mean, Dick in the Dirt is not much of a song.
Yeah.
Don't Make Me Wait Don't Make Me Wait. I love a good sappy pop song from Sammy, but that's almost too much for some
Yeah.
reason. And Burning Down the City to me is just not I can never remember really how it goes. I said, to me, the lasting legacy of that song is that Sammy drops an F-bomb in it. That's what I always think of. I don't
Yeah.
think how the actual song goes. So yeah, he was really lucky that he had some, but I mean, let's talk about side 1. Three Lock Box is my favorite Sammy Hagar solo album. But if I had to pick a favorite solo track, I think I might go with Swept Away.
You mentioned that on the
Yeah, what
Bogus
a
Otis
cool
show.
song. What a cool song.
Yeah. Really good lyrics, solid lyrics. I know he takes a hit lyrically a
and
lot,
it's
Sammy.
smart. To me, it's
Yeah.
another smart arrangement.
Yeah.
Doesn't do the predictable thing.
Yeah. And then of course he joins another band after
Yeah.
that album. It's
Yeah.
they kind of, I can't remember, Van Halen, I think it was.
Yeah.
What do you
Claudio the mechanic, the
oh yeah, Claudio.
mechanic to thank for introducing Sammy and Eddie. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what's crazy is, if Sammy's telling the truth, he had thought about retiring. I don't believe that. I think
Well,
that would have lasted for a
he
month. But
definitely thought about taking time off, because if you
right.
notice, he cut his hair. That's
Yeah.
why when you look at the 5150 era, that's why his hair's so short.
Yeah, and Alex Van Halen was
Full
busting
grown
his
back,
stones.
right?
Yeah, he's making fun. It's like, what the hell is that haircut?
Yeah. By the time OU812 came out, he had all his hair back. But yeah, that's why his hair's so short in those photo sessions, because he was planning. He was going to go live off the grid, and he's a funny guy, man. He's got some wild ideas sometimes.
He's got way too much energy. He would have, after like a week or two, he'd be like,
nah, I'm bored. He'd call up Neil Sean and want to jam.
Yeah. So tell me, 5150, OU812, For Unlawful, Carnal Knowledge, and Balance. Those are the albums, studio albums, all number 1. If you have to pick one, which one is it?
Oh, For Unlawful, Carnal Knowledge. Easy.
Yeah.
Easy. My favorite Van Halen album, period.
Yeah. That stood up so well.
From the time it came out, from the moment it came out, because I hadn't heard a thing off of it when that came out in that summer. And I remember it was so new. It was still, I think I was in a Kmart. It was still in the boxes. And you remember when the cassettes used to come in those plastic security things they'd have to open up for you at the counter? It was still.
And if they didn't, you're not leaving.
Yeah. So I pulled one out of this box. It wasn't even on the shelf yet, and went out and paid for it. Hadn't heard anything off of it. And then I heard, and I'm like, whoa. And the song after, that's a good song. That's a good song. And it's like
Judgment Day is one of the baddest songs.
It had been 3 years. It's the longest gap in between Van Halen albums, right? So I was just so into that album, and I listened to it recently. Nothing's ever going to top that one. I love 5150.
Yeah.
That's a special album. OU812 is very special to me because it was the first Van Halen I bought as a new release. I think it had been out for a week or so. So that was really special. And Balance, I liked Balance. A lot of people didn't. I liked Balance. It proved that Van Halen were one of just a handful of traditional rock bands that could survive the 90s, could survive grunge. They still had a triple platinum album out of it.
What I've noticed is, when I'm in the mood to listen to Sammy era Van Halen, I'm now going to For Unlawful first. And that's interesting, because OU812 is always my favorite Sammy era album. I have a connection to it. It is the same thing with me. It was the first album I ever bought, and it was also the first experience of being a fan of Van Halen in real time as they're releasing singles and videos.
Waiting for,
right?
So 5150 was already out. I didn't have 5150 until 88.
Same here.
I had a dubbed copy of it, but I didn't have a copy of it, right?
I had my
OU812 bought it, I bought it fresh.
And I love OU812, but now I just find the sound of For Unlawful. It's really stood up over time. It doesn't sound of a time. It doesn't sound like 80s, 90s, whatever. And the production, the drums, I mean, just everything. And Judgment Day is maybe my favorite deep track from the Sammy era.
It
Just
is so good.
badass song. It gets better every time I listen to it. So yeah, it's hard to pick one, but I guess I would maybe say For Unlawful now. Or you went to second, and 5150 is third, and that's a really close third because that's the album that turned me on not only to Van Halen but just rock and roll in general. I was chasing that high that I felt from listening to that.
Yeah. It's a I even think Balance is quite a strong
Oh,
album.
I love Balance.
I think they're all very strong.
Aftershock.
That is why I don't think I've ever been so disappointed in a band as I was in '96 when it was when Sammy was not in the band anymore. I was really I'm like this doesn't make any sense. I just like it hadn't been that long that they had the video for Humans Being out, and that was great. And I remember,
oh, what a song.
This will tide us over till the next album. The one time I ever saw Van Halen, the one time I ever saw Sammy was on the Balance tour. And, we know now what was going on, but they didn't look like four guys that hated each other, and they certainly didn't play like it. So yeah, I was really in a funk over that. It was like,
I'll tell you what happened with me. I actually was on a high because I'm thinking Dave is back and I love Dave. So I'm a huge Dave era Van Halen fan, and I'm a huge fan of Dave's solo. So for me, I get to finally see this lineup that I never got to see when they were originally around. So there was that high, and then that all turned to shit. They show up on the '96 MTV Video Awards, and it falls apart. So
you can watch it fall apart.
Yeah,
the most amazing real-time example. You can watch all the plans that Eddie and Alex might have had for their band fall apart on stage.
Yeah,
Dave just would not. Dave could have retired with Van Halen if he'd have played his cards right, but he had to. He had to take the spotlight, and he looked like such a goon.
And so that meant Sammy's no longer there. Dave's no longer there now.
Yeah.
So now it was like the hangover period. It's like, oh, fuck. There's no Van Halen.
Yeah, it's like, what just happened?
And, when Gary joined, I was slightly excited, but it was so hard to come off of that high of this possibility that we're going to get this huge reunion of the original four.
This is how that timeline went for me. So like I'd seen the MTV thing, and I thought, what an idiot, this is not going to work. The best of was out. Of course I bought it. Yeah, I'm a fan, you know what I mean? And I thought Me Wise Magic was awesome. Like I thought that was the other Can't Get This Stuff No More was okay. But Me Wise Magic, that put me back to like Fair Warning era, like Diver, like when the real experimental stuff on Diver Down, like little guitars, and I'm like, okay, this might not be so bad, but it turned out the way it turned out. And I'm a big Extreme fan. I love Extreme. Gary's fantastic. It was a bad fit. It was a bad fit. I tried so hard to like Van Halen 3. I bought it when it first came out. I still think they were trying to make him sing like Sammy. When you listen to his vamps at the end of Without You, or if you listen to Fire in the Hole in general, Fire in the Hole is basically a Van Hagar era Van Halen. It's just begging for Sammy to sing it. And the other stuff on it, like Once, it just gets really, really weird. Now there's some cool stuff on it, like Dirty Water Dog, but I remember thinking I shouldn't have to work at liking a Van Halen album, because ever since OU812 came out, it was just a given. I would love it.
Instant, right? Yeah, it was just such a difficult time to be a fan.
And it crippled Eddie. I mean, creatively, it wasn't. It only went gold. It was the first time he didn't have a platinum album, and what a waste. We had all these years go by with hardly any music to speak of.
Yeah, and an album he made sober, the first album he ever made sober. Yeah. So that, I'm sure, devastated him that it didn't pan out the way he had hoped. It was that was the beginning of the dark period, as they call it for Eddie.
There was just nothing to speak of. Now, the silver lining in that for me was that I liked Sammy Hagar as a solo artist. So we'll get more Sammy Hagar albums.
Which we did, and before we get into the post Van Halen years, there was that one album that for me personally is my favorite Sammy solo album. That's I Never Said Goodbye, 1987. That's got Eddie on bass. Eddie co-produced it. And it's got what I say, in my opinion, the best solo song Sammy's ever written, which is Eagles Fly. And it's got Give to Live on there as well, which those two songs he included often throughout the years.
Those are like One Way to Rock. Those became honorary Van Halen songs. Yeah.
This for you would probably be what the most surprising success story of Sammy's
I
solo career,
think
because it was
so.
just
Yeah.
a contractual obligation
Yeah,
for him.
not just success as, the fact that it went gold without a tour to promote it and probably minimal promo from Geffen. I mean, past like with the first 2 weeks of, it being out, how much money are they going to sink into it? This was a business transaction. Let's face it. This is why if you look inside of 5150, it said Sammy Hagar solo recordings are available on Geffen Records. You didn't see that with a lot of different albums with, members, but that's why.
Interesting observation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is stuff I figured out over time. This stuff, none of these things that are written in credits, or you see something, it's not there for no reason. It's like if you look at if you've got an original pressing of Metallica's Master of Puppets, which they were fully on Elektra Records by this point, but there's a Megaforce logo. That was a deal they made with Johnny Z upon leaving Megaforce. The next album would have the Megaforce logo featured on it.
Yeah, this is the stuff people like us geek out
So
on.
this is sort of, I know we're getting into the weeds here, but
I love it.
yeah, and I think that I Never Said Goodbye is a much better album than VOA. It's a much stronger album, and it could have been a complete throwaway. I mean, Sammy could have looked around, found some cassettes in his basement of stuff, and just given Geffen a 9-10 song album of leftovers. But no, he came up with a really strong collection of songs. I think that the good vibe in the band was, personified by the fact that Eddie co-produced the album for it, played bass on it, solos on one song. I didn't know that until later, but
yeah,
you listen
which
to
is, by the way, on
a little bit of tapping, maybe.
Eagles Fly. You're right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because it's got that woo, like it's got that whammy bar, and there's a
yep.
little bit of tapping on it. It's not an over-the-top solo, but it's like once I knew that, I was like, well, yeah, of course that's Eddie. But
And by the way, Eagles Fly could have been on OU It One too, but Alex said no, he didn't like the song. Did you ever hear that story?
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
or just didn't think it would fit for
it
a
may
Van
have
Halen
done.
album.
It might have done better because it only peaked at like 97, I think, on Billboard, which is
Yeah,
Give to Live did respectively. It hit 23. The video got some play, and the album went gold when it could have just tanked. Now, what I find weird about that album, of course, is the fact that it came out without a title. And it wasn't, the title was decided upon. Somebody was asleep at the switch there, because how do you put an album out without a title? You just give it a serial number and say good. But apparently MTV had a contest, and it was decided the album was called I Never Said Goodbye. But it wasn't until I think 92 that the reissue happened. And I don't think there's ever been a vinyl issue of it with the title on it.
yeah,
All the copies of it I have are just self-titled. I don't have any of the reissues.
yeah. I don't think I think I have only I have the cassette, the original cassette, which is, it doesn't have that Never Say Goodbye title. And by the way,
No.
you sent me an amazing MP3, an alternate version of Standing at the Crossroads, which leads off side 2, and that leads into Privacy.
Yeah.
And there's a longer version of that, because I love Sammy's guitar work on that. Standing at the Same Old Crossroads, it's slide guitar, bluesy, goes right into Privacy. I was blown away. I don't know if you can reveal a secret as to where you got that from.
Well, I'll tell you. No, I got to thank my good friend Mike Ladano from
It's off vinyl.
Rock.
I can hear the crackling of the vinyl record.
Yeah. Mike Ladano from Grab a Stack of Rock is the one that put me wise to that, because honestly, I didn't know of its existence, but it is on the 12-inch single to Give to Live. Now, I have the regular American 45 picture sleeve of Give to Live, and it's got When the Hammer Falls on the B-side. But the 12-inch has When the Hammer Falls and this extended version of Standing at the Same Old Crossroads. Now, honestly, Standing at the Same Old Crossroads is less a song, more of just a showcase for Sammy as a slide guitar player, and he is very good. And it works better as a short intro, before Privacy, before those drums kick in. But it's cool to hear this extended version. So yeah, share. Yeah, you got to share it, man. You got to share it.
Really cool.
And again, there is a B-side / rare track / alternate takes / album that Universal could conceivably put out for Sammy of these stray songs. Like I said,
Box set. Yeah.
the alternate version of heavy metal. You've got not one but two complete different originals as B-sides from the Standing Hampton era, the Satisfied and Don't Get Hooked. Those have never been on CD as far as I know. And there's a place these songs should be collected up. I tried my hardest to account for every sort of stray song that was out there. You remember that song Open he had?
No.
In like 2008? But I remember hearing the song on rock radio for like a week called Open. It was undeniably Sammy, and it was digital only.
Maybe I have not heard this.
It should have been on Cosmic Universal Fashion. I know I'm jumping ahead, but those are the songs that I want on a CD. I don't want air. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I want them on a physical format to listen to.
Sure.
Back to Never Said Goodbye for one reason, and I got to do this. This is one of my prized possessions. Not only was it his last album on Geffen and he thought it was going to be his last solo album ever. It's also the last album to come out like this.
8-track, baby.
That is a Columbia House. That is a U.S. Columbia House record club only version of Sammy's 1987 album.
Yeah, I think Tim Durling, we're gonna have to crown you the king of 8-tracks because you have an amazing book on collecting 8-tracks, which is so cool.
I didn't even have that when I did the Unspooled book. So
yeah, Unspooled, yeah.
Every picture, all the albums pictured in this book are from my own collection too. I'm only missing one 8-track by Sammy, and that's Rematch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Rematch.
That's the only one. And then I'll have all of them. Aside from the fact that there doesn't appear to be one for VOA, which doesn't make any sense.
No 8-track for VOA.
Does not appear to be one, which makes no sense because, again, why would an 87 album exist in that format? But his biggest album from 3 years earlier exists. Even the HSAS album exists. So,
well, I think because when I had you on for Unspooled, we were getting into that where you get to the like late 80s and it's like hit or miss. And there's no explanation as to why a label would have it on 8-track, why they decided not to.
It's hit or miss, but usually, a band will stop, and that'll be it. Like Kiss, for example. Animalize is the last Kiss album to appear on 8-track. But in this case, it would be like, if you're a Kiss fan, you can follow this logic. If Asylum didn't come out on 8-track, which is from 85, but Crazy Nights from 87 did. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense. So I can't say for 100% sure that it doesn't. I have no evidence of it existing. VOA, which you would think it would. It was a successful album. You'd think Geffen would, if they're issuing these other albums to the record clubs, I don't know. It's just a big mystery. So my two grails that I found since doing the Unspooled book were I Never Said Goodbye, or the self-titled, and 5150. So now I have all the Van Halen ones.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So now we get to the post Van Halen solo years, which is really interesting. By the way, just want to give props to the songs High Hopes and Buying My Way into Heaven, because that's off his best of Unboxed.
Really good songs.
Give some love to those songs.
Surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a nice spread. I was going to radio college at that point, and I remember getting an MCA sampler in and seeing High Hopes on there. I was like, oh, yeah, this is cool. And then I went and bought Unboxed, and that was a good 1-disc, 12-song collection of Sammy's best. But yeah, it's got 2 really good new songs on them.
Solid best of with 2 great new tracks. But Marching to Mars 1997, that's the first one post Van Halen. He's got Huey Lewis on harmonica and Little White Lie,
stars on
Matt Sorum, Slash. They're all Mickey Hart on Marching, the title track.
United Montrose.
What was the Meatloaf connection to? Amnesty is Granted.
So Amnesty is Granted. Sammy wrote that song. Meatloaf had recorded it 2 years prior. He'd recorded it in 1995.
Right. Is that on Bad at Hell 2?
Welcome to the Neighborhood.
Or Welcome to
the album that came out after Bad at Hell 2.
Yeah. So Marching to Mars, I mean, that's straight ahead rocker, Sammy. And God, I love Both Sides Now. It's the other one I love on that album. But
Marching to Mars is my second favorite Sammy Hagar album.
Favorite. Okay.
I've loved it since the time it came out. I think it's one of Sammy's most personal. I hear so much hurt in that album because he said, I never wanted to leave Van Halen. I figured I'd be retiring with these guys. And like he said, why would I leave the best band in the world? I'd have to be crazy.
Just it was a bummer that things went
Oh, it's just a
south with
shame
Van
that that
Halen.
whole situation went south the way that all happened. The more you read about it, the death of Ed Leffler really did a number. They were never the same after that. And all of these
Ed
petty
Leffler, by the
arguments.
way, for those who may not know, managed Sammy as a
Sammy,
solo artist,
and then Sammy brought
then
him
Van
in.
Halen.
Yeah, because Van Halen at that point actually didn't have a manager.
Right.
And I think that's been a lot of the problem. I think that's why there hasn't been a lot. There were years when there was nothing from the Van Halen camp. You heard nothing out of them, right?
Yeah.
Except
Leffler died of cancer in
yeah,
95.
end of the war. So then they got Ray Daniels, and that just for Van Halen, that just did not work out.
That was it.
Yeah. And so petty conflicts became big conflicts, and next thing you know, Sammy found himself out of Van Halen.
And you hear how great Sammy's voice sounds still on those albums. It still sounds great now, but you could.
But you listen to Salvation on Sand Hill, and like he's singing fantastic, and like I said, I think I can hear him letting out his pain on these songs. But by the end of the album, you get to Marching to Mars, and all of a sudden it sounds like, you know what, he's going to be all right.
One of my favorite Sammy songs.
Yeah. But I mean, Little White Lie, that's a pretty pointed song, especially if you see the video, but it's a cool song. Cool.
It's directed at Eddie.
Cool bluesy song. I love how it builds, and I love how it leaves you wanting more, because just as it kicks in, it's done.
It's a quick tune. Yeah, I don't even think
I don't even think it's 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But I love Leaving the Warmth of the Womb, which is, again, it's Sammy wanting to heal things. So he and Ronnie Montrose, I don't think, had spoken. So he brought in that original Montrose band. So Ronnie Montrose, Bill Church, and Denny Carmassi, the four of them. So on the confines of the Sammy Hagar album, there's a bona fide Montrose song, and I love it. Yeah, it's always been it'll never topple Three Lock Box, but it's my second favorite.
And radio was welcoming Sammy as a solo artist. They were playing stuff off.
It was a top 20 album. I have to think it was close to gold. It's a shame that Sammy wasn't able to regain his footing as a solo artist as far as sales go. But then again, a lot of veteran artists were suffering at this point. Their new albums weren't selling that well. So
what do you think of the albums that finished out the 90s and into the 2000s? Because this is where we get into the Jimmy Buffett vibe that Sammy had, right? You got Red Voodoo, 1999 with the Waboritas, 1013. Great album, goes back to kind of his straight ahead rock roots.
So Red Voodoo was Red Voodoo. I remember buying that when it first came out. Mas Tequila is the last song that Sammy put out by himself that got any amount of radio play. It's okay. I wish that he'd have made it sound just different enough so that he didn't have to, credit Gary Glitter. But I mean, it's a fun song, and he sings it really well. There's great guitar playing in it, so I'm okay with it. Red Voodoo is hit and miss for me because it is when he's starting to get into that beach persona, and on a personal level, it was really good. He seems to have found that peace, right? Like after those turbulent last few years with Van Halen, and then, well, I mean, it was essentially, he put it like, if a band is like a marriage, it was like finding, your spouse in bed with their ex, which is exactly what was happening. Because Eddie said, well, we've been working with David Lee Roth, and he's like, for 10 years, this guy was the enemy you're working with. Like, how dare, so the betrayal was there. So by the time he gets to the Red Voodoo, he kind of just wants to party, and I'm all for that, but I'm just not into the whole laid back, beach front acoustic guitar. I'm not into that whole thing. Now, Red Voodoo is still pretty good for the most part, but yeah, it starts to, to me, there's a real slide in as far as like how much hard rock you're going to get per album. Now, having said that, even though it's 20 years old or 24 years old, I'm still going to call it a latter-day album. I think 1013 is fantastic. That is a killer album. And like to do a book like this, I had to, listen and re-listen and re-listen and make sure I knew what I was talking about. And re-listening to 1013, honestly, like by the time these albums started to come out, I was starting to have kids, and you just don't have time for stuff like, you know, your hobbies. So I would buy the albums, listen to them, file them. But when I went back and started digging through some of these albums from this period, I'm like, I forgot how good this was. Like that is
Shakadoobie.
great album. It's got Three in the Middle and Protection and Let Sally Drive, Shakadoobie, Deeper Kind of Love. Deeper Kind of Love, if Van Halen had done that, that would have been a big hit.
That was a single.
That could have been a hit for Van Halen.
Yeah. Serious Juju. He's trying some different stuff there sonically. It was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of works.
And the song 1013, man, play that every year on your birthday. It's a great song.
Yeah.
It's a birthday song right there. But Three in the Middle, you're right.
I don't have any problem with that album.
Tropic of Capricorn, I love.
Yeah, I even like that song. It's a rocker. The only song I really don't like on that album, and I mentioned this in the book, I don't really like The Real Deal because I don't like the way Sammy sings.
Yeah.
He's got this exaggerated blues man persona, and I think, man, you got one of the greatest voices ever. Use it.
Yeah. All right.
But well, you know what? That's just one person's opinion.
Yeah.
It was all about presenting the albums. Here are the albums. Here are the songs on them. Here's what it looked like. And so, yeah, but I'm not going to say everything's great because I don't think that.
No. And that's cool, man. Hey, it's impossible to be a fan and like every single thing, especially when you're an artist that's been around as long as Sammy. I mean, there's got to be something you're not going to like along the way. However, Tim, this is the one that I'm going to argue for. Not for sale. Not for sale. I like this album. I like Stand Up. I like Hallelujah. I like Halfway to Memphis. Things Have Changed. Not a big fan. Whole Lot of Zepp. No, but I like The Big Nail. Make It All Right is my favorite on this entire album. I think that would have been a great Van Halen song. The Big Square Inch. Yeah, I'm in. Why are you out on this one?
Well, yeah, I was going to say anybody that's read the book already knows that I'm basically the complete opposite, but that's what makes these discussions really fun.
On the legendary label 33rd Street Records.
So the first thing that comes to mind with Not for Sale is how hard a time I had finding it. This was the first time I had to send away for a new Sammy Hagar album. You know, it's one thing to order a vinyl of the Red album on eBay because you can't find it locally, but this is a brand new album and I can't find it in the store. So I had to wait a little bit to get to it, and I'm like, okay, now this will all be worth it once I listen to it. And I remember being seriously underwhelmed by it, and unfortunately, that opinion has not changed. I find that most of the songs in this album are completely underwritten, and it sounds rushed to me. And maybe that's because Sammy even says he wasn't planning on putting an album out. It just happened, and it just sounds like that's exactly what it sounds like to me. It sounds rushed. I think Stand Up is way overrated. It had a lot of attention because it was recorded in the movie Rockstar, and everybody and their dog is claiming that song is theirs. Jeff Soto says it's his. Dude from Steelheart says he sang it. Mark Slaughter, and it's Sammy Hagar's song.
Well, have you ever heard his version is played a lot in sports games? I hear it. I'm watching a game on TV. I'll hear Sammy's version. Yeah,
that makes sense, and that's good if they're playing the right version. But I just don't know. The songs sound half cooked to me. Now, what I like, The Big Square Inch, is that the one that he sings with David Lauser?
Let's see. The Big Square Inch. I don't know if he sings it
with somebody.
Let me see here. Hold on a sec. Let's see. It's got to be in the book, right? I would say.
Well, I could look it up.
By Sammy. Let's see. Hold on.
Oh, he's just about to get to it, I'm sure.
Right. Big Nail, Ain't Nothing. How about The Big Square Inch? Heck, they should have butted these tracks together.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, trades vocals with David Lauser. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like that one. Yeah.
His voice is charming and an Ace Frehley circa 1978 to 19.
Yeah, I kind of like David Lauser's vocals on that. Hallelujah is okay. I don't mind that one. I can't stand the Zeppelin.
Oh, no.
Like that should never have been. And I joke in the book, I said, I hope when he started working with Jason Bonham that Jason said, don't ever do that again.
Maybe that's why he's not in Sammy's band anymore.
Oh, that's a non.
Man.
You know what? That's a
It's a non-story.
I'm so sick of hearing about that.
Actually, Sammy finally responded because Jason was quoted as saying he was kind of bummed. He was a little disappointed, but he still gets along great with Sammy. But Sammy commented and said, "Look, I love the guy. He's a friggin' amazing drummer. Just we needed somebody. He couldn't do it. We moved on."
Yeah. It's weird because essentially he now has Chickenfoot Mark II.
Yep.
Because Kenny Aronoff did this tour. We're jumping ahead. Yeah, not for sale, man. I had to buy it because I can't, I had to. I'm a fan, and I'm glad I did. But it's never stuck to me. This is 33rd Street Records, which had something to do with Tower Records. It was defunct within 2 years. And this is another thing that, and Sammy's not alone in this, like Alice Cooper. There's a ton of these veteran artists that they just end up bouncing from crappy label to crappy label, and it just becomes really hard to find their albums. That's why I really wanted to make sure that there was no way this album was going to stop at a certain point. It was going to be like all the albums are going to be here. I don't care how successful or unsuccessful they were.
Sure.
Yeah, Not for Sale. Catalog. It's not my least favorite. Not for Sale is not my least favorite.
Is Living It Up your least favorite?
Yes.
That's mine. Yeah.
I like it more. Guys, they could have reached through the screen. I said, "Hey, man, I got it. Have to be honest. It's just too laid back for me."
I'm trying to remember. I listened to that interview, so they really, they're fans of it. I during the summer months, I think I can enjoy it more because it is a summertime type of album.
To me, that's what Light Roast is for.
Light Roast, yeah, which is all acoustic. But Sam I Am, I never really dug. Living on a Coastline, I like. I love This Bar. No, but rest in peace, Toby Keith. It's not nothing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not a country guy either, so I'm not likely to. I'm not liable to like that album. But
no, Let Me Take You There.
Did I buy it? Yes, of course I bought. Yeah, it's got a lot of covers on it too.
It's got a great cover though. It's a great shot of Sammy on the cover of Living.
Well, one thing I will say this: it basically lets you know what you're in for.
Yeah,
this is not going to be a hard rocking album.
Yep. I say this.
He can do whatever he wants. It's just,
I was just about to say, I say this all the time. I support every artist's choice to do what they feel they want. They feel most inspired to do. It doesn't matter. Hey, look, we'll come back for the next one if we're not happy with it. But I will say this though. One of my top 10 Sammy songs is on this album, and it's Sailing. And I don't think you feel the same way, but I don't
remember how it goes, so it didn't leave a mess.
I love Sailing.
Yeah.
I love Sailing.
So maybe one of these times I'll put it on because I do people might be surprised to hear this if I say I don't like an album. If I like the artist, I'll go back and maybe it'll click one of these times. I don't know. I will say this: it hangs together as an album, which is more than I can say for what followed.
Cosmic Universal Fashion.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
Weird because you talk about top heavy. Phenomenal first 3 tracks, and then after that it just kind of goes downhill. You got Cosmic Universal Fashion
in a real hurry. Like Sammy had 2 weeks to get it.
The title track had been just a standalone internet single, I think, and then it was put on this album.
And it was also on this album called Baghdad Heavy Metal.
Right,
a combination of Eastern and Western artists, and this song is on it. I liked the video. It was a fun play on the Right Now video, especially the part where it's like, Mikey is still thinking about a solo project. Loud is really good. Peephole is really good.
So you like Loud? Okay. Maybe I listen to Loud again.
To me,
but Psycho, Vertigo, and Peephole are phenomenal.
Those are good. Loud is a cover. It's a John Eddie song, but it sounds like a Sammy Hagar 3-chord rocker, and then maybe and based on what follows, and I kind of like the one he did with Billy Gibbons, Switch on the Light, but it gets really laid back. I don't need to hear him cover the Beastie Boys. I don't need to hear acoustic versions of Cabo Wabo and Dreams. But the other weird thing about Cosmic Universal Fashion is that it seems like it was out, and the next thing you know, Chickenfoot's all everybody was talking about. So it came out, it disappeared. It was on Roadrunner, so it was like a semi. At that time, they were a successful label, but it was just thrown out there. Another thing I wanted to address with this book, and I always want to be careful about it because it's not any disrespect to any of the musicians because Sammy's always worked with great musicians, but I don't care if the album's called Sammy Hagar and the Circle, Sammy and the Wabos, Sammy Hagar and the Waboritas. Those are Sammy Hagar albums to me, because Sammy's the driving force. He's the writer. He's the aside from Jesse Harms, they aren't writers in that band. And Cosmic Universal Fashion, if you look at the personnel on that album, it's practically the Waboritas on most of the album, yet it's credited to Sammy Hagar, which further lets me know it makes no difference. So, but again, there are some good songs on there, but it's very hit and miss, and it peters out really quick. And fortunately, and I think we're just about to get to this, things were about to get really good.
Chickenfoot, man. Yeah. Chickenfoot 2009.
Love that first Chickenfoot album so much. And I think the second one is almost as good. I prefer the debut, but man, I really wish that had continued, because they had a sound. It wasn't the same. It wasn't the same as Sammy's solo stuff. It didn't sound anything like Van Halen, other than the fact that you got to hear Sammy and Mike singing together again, which was, I realized how much I missed that, because those two sound so good singing together.
And I forget Andy Johns produced that first one.
The first, yeah, and Mike Fraser produced the second one. Did a fine. Yeah. I think that might have been one of the last albums Andy Johns produced. It's a great sounding album. It's a heavy, not heavy, but it's a hard rocking album. And my favorite part is, and I forgot about this until I started doing the book, I forgot that actually went gold. That's practically unheard of. Like
for that
was practically unheard of for a. But I know it's a quote unquote new band, but I mean, a bunch of veteran rock and roll guys to have a gold record in 2009.
Number 5 record too. Number 5 album.
Yeah. Now the second one did nothing. Like it came out, and maybe that's why we haven't seen a third one. I guess
a little more polished. Yeah. Different Devil, I just think is an outstanding song. I think if it was 10 years earlier and radio was more.
That's a weird one for me. I get into this with people. I don't like that song.
Yeah, you don't like it, huh? Yeah, I think if radio was
fit Chickenfoot at all. That sounds more like something that would have been on 3 Lock Box or VOA.
Yeah.
And I probably would have liked it more, but it sounds, in context of Chickenfoot, it sounds too poppy. I know that's, and people that know me say, yeah, but you like all kinds of Sammy's poppy stuff. You like Feels So Good. I'm like, I know. It makes no sense. I don't care for that song.
Wow. I can't listen to it enough. And I was gonna say, I think, there was a time there rock radio was more influential if they played a single, and I think maybe it would have done better. But interesting though how people hear songs differently, right?
Yeah. There's great stuff in there. Bigfoot is great.
Bigfoot.
I love it's different, but I love 3.5 Letters.
3.5 Letters, very different, but very cool. The lyrics about people losing their jobs, and these are actual letters from people.
That's why it's called what it's called. Yeah.
Wrote to Sammy saying, look, man, if you can help me out, something's going wrong. That's a great one too.
I even like the hidden track on there. Was it called No Change?
Yep.
Yeah.
No Change.
No, it's good. And if anybody wanted any proof of the fact that this wasn't just your, a label throwing a bunch of guys together and because that's what, Frontiers Records does that a lot. That's why most of the time when people say they're doing a side project, I roll my eyes, because they never last, right? They never did anything. But all anyone has to do is watch that DVD Blu-ray they put out, Chickenfoot, after the first tour, the Get Your Buzz On. They sounded fantastic live. They sounded like they've been playing together for years. I know.
I saw them live in Connecticut.
But Sammy and Joe and Chad, they just sounded so good. And I got to give those guys a lot of credit. They went out on tour. They didn't play any Van Halen songs where they easily could have dipped into the Van Halen catalog. They did the entire Chickenfoot album. They did like My Generation, Highway Star, and the only old Sammy song they did was Bad Motor Scooter.
Yeah, they really were serious about, which is surprising that they didn't last longer, because they were very serious about them as a band. They're not going to go out there and play any Chili Pepper songs, Van Halen songs, Satriani songs, anything like that. Yeah, it is a shame. Maybe they'll get back together. You never know. But right now, Sammy's got a great thing going with the Best of All Worlds tour and band.
Oh, look, nothing would make me happier than having to go back and do a second edition of this, and have another album to do a chapter on
an album. And you got a song coming, because he already said him and Joe Satriani wrote a song that's dedicated to Eddie. It's about Eddie.
And if I'm going to be completely honest, I'm really surprised somebody hasn't mentioned this to me yet. I did miss a couple of things.
Did you?
As bad as I hate to admit it. Now,
Okay.
I will defend myself on one because it's digital only. And it's a song called Inner Child. That there's a clip of him doing it like during a Dan Rather interview, but I think that there's a digital version of it, which I don't do digital, so that's why. But the
Inner
other
child.
one, but the other one is the Christmas song he did a few years ago. Santa
Oh, that's
Once
right.
After Christmas.
Wait, what's it called again?
I totally forgot about that song. It just totally slipped my mind.
What's the title again?
I think it's called Santa's Going South for Christmas. I've since
Yes,
bought the single,
you're right.
the 12-inch single. It was a record store day thing, I think, in 2019. I
I
totally
remember.
forgot about that. And I also forgot to mention that he co-wrote a couple of songs on Heart's 1990 album Brigade.
Wow.
Yeah, he co-wrote, of course, Danny Carmassi was in Heart, and he
Yep.
was in Montrose and Sammy's solo band. So yeah, he co-wrote the song The Night, and there's one called Fallen from Grace. So that's something that another edition of this book I would include that stuff. But other than that, I think I did a pretty good job at scooping up all the.
Dude, you freaking,
And
yeah,
I
man.
almost missed one at the end of '99 because he did that song with Mickey Hart called what was it called? It was about Y2K.
Why? Oh, why two? Yes.
Why can't I think of it?
Yes. Jeez, we can.
Code War.
Cold War, which I'm a huge fan of that song.
I
wish
didn't know about it. I didn't know about it. I don't know who put me wise to it, but then I went and listened to it. So it's in the end of the chapter on Red Voodoo, because the time wise it makes sense. But
So is that anywhere? But I'm sure YouTube. But is there anywhere else?
I don't think it's, again, there's songs that need to be put together in physical form.
Yeah, I really like that song.
Yeah.
And I'm a Dead fan, so Mickey Hart, it's definitely drums in space, Mickey Hart type stuff.
Oh
like
yeah,
he's
you can
just
tell it's
drum loops and all
if
this
you
funky
thought that
stuff.
Marching to Mars was a little spacey, this one takes it further.
Yeah, they're buddies. Yeah, I thought that was a cool collaboration. So let's wind down now with the last three albums, right? Because we got Sammy with The Circle, which we got Space Between 2019, Lockdown 2020, which came out in 2021, Crazy Times 2022. Just kind of my thoughts on it, and then I'll let you finish up with your thoughts. Their cover of David Bowie's Heroes, a great cover, phenomenal cover, like that. Lockdown as a whole, like it, really cool that they did that and gave the fans something during a shitty time and COVID, man. Nobody was
wish that there'd been full versions of most of this.
There were abbreviated versions of songs, yeah.
But it's fun. Definitely fun to listen to.
Yeah, let's see. A Space Between. Yeah, I like Affirmation, and there's a few other songs I could really dig. I like it, but I like Crazy Times even more so. Father Time.
Yeah.
And then there's the digital bonus track song of that Crazy Times album called 2120. It's on the Japanese 2120.
Yeah, that's great. It's good.
What
it
a song.
Sound like it was recorded at the same time, though. If you know, it doesn't even sound the same. But yeah, it's good. So yeah, I mean, he put Sammy Hagar and Friends out in 2013. That's a mixed bag. It's kind of still got.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. I'm sorry.
And it's got a lot of covers on it, and he's got a lot of guest stars on it. But it does have some. I think it's got some pretty good material on it. I actually kind of like the version of Personal Jesus. I think that one's all right. I like their version of Ramblin' Gamblin' Man.
I'm Going Down is on there with.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Taj Mahal, I think, is on that one.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, Space Between was another one of those albums that it came out. I bought it. I listened to it. I think I did a review episode on it, and then I kind of forgot about it. I actually quite like a lot of the songs in there, like Free Man. That's a really heavy one.
The last track is really cool.
Yeah,
the gang vocals.
Yeah. It kind of begins how it ends. I like how they.
Hey, Without Greed, it's called.
They did Trust Fund Baby, which they used the riff from I've Got the Fire, but they wrote a kind of a new song around it. So that's why Ronnie Montrose has credit for it, because it's got that like it's got the fire riff.
Really cool. Yeah, you're right.
But I think Crazy Times, I agree with you. I think Crazy Times is better. And it's kind of the same thing when I did the Kansas book. If the more recent albums, either if the more recent albums weren't that good, or they just didn't do any new albums, I don't know how excited I would have been to do a book. But he's still out there. It doesn't matter. It does not matter how well these albums sell. He's still making new music at a time when a lot of his peers either stopped making new music or they take years between albums to get together and do something, you know?
I love it. He's just so excited about
But
getting up every morning.
I like Slow Grain. I like You Get What You Paid For. Right. I like the cover of Pump It Up. Like, it's good.
If you follow him on social media, you just see this guy is just every day he's doing something, and he's living his life to the fullest.
This is the thing that I don't
77 years old.
It's one thing if you just don't like somebody's music, that's fine. How can you hate this guy? He's just having so much fun. He's a philanthropist, you know what I mean? Like, you know, he's a good guy. He's a good dude. And when you listen to something like Crazy Times, which is, you know, it's over 2 years old now, but you got to remember when that album was recorded, he was like 74.
Yes.
Like, I can't imagine my dad on stage doing what Sammy does, and they're the same age practically. I just can't, you know what I mean? Like, it's amazing to me. He's like the fountain of youth or something. Like, he will not stop.
I used to think maybe he was abducted by aliens. Like, maybe he's an alien, you know, because it was a while there. Like, he wasn't aging at all either. I'm like, damn, this guy's like in his 60s now.
There's a mirror in his attic aging for him.
Yeah, he's just starting to look a little older now, but it's like, you know, I
ring around. He's not aging. Yeah.
Right. I saw him running back and forth on the stage for 2 hours when I saw him in the summer, and it was like, how the fuck does this guy do? You know,
and it's not like he's doing. You know, it's not like he was doing one show a week either.
No,
you know what I mean.
Full blown tour.
I really wish that tour had come closer to where I was. I would have had to go to Toronto or Boston, I think.
Yeah, so that sucks.
Quite a long ways. So,
well, maybe we'll get a live video, something, you know, something.
Yeah, like you know, I love the song selections he was doing. Even with the Van Halen stuff, they were getting were ambitious with the songs.
Summer Nights.
Yeah. But didn't they do Seventh Seal, or am I imagining?
Yes. Yeah, they did Seventh Seal.
Like, they probably didn't do Seventh. That's never been played since the Balance tour.
Right. And he plans on bringing some more stuff out on the Vegas run.
Well, I think he's right. And when he says, like, you know, if he and Mike, they own that stuff.
Yeah.
You know? So
which of course, again, the haters.
Oh yeah.
How dare he?
But the haters didn't like that stuff anyway. So what difference does it make? You can't make, you know, you can't. I don't even, you know, I can't even get into all that. I can talk the first 6 albums, and I really like The Different Kind of Truth too. I really like that album.
Yeah.
I was all ready to hate it. You know, it's been Dave and everything, and the Hall of Fame was such a disaster, but I liked it. And I like it more now than I did when it came out. So I can talk the old stuff, no problem. It's just that I've got a soft spot for the Sammy era, and I just think the guy can sing the Telephone Book, and it would sound pretty good. I mean, and the proof is, if you start listening to the music that I talk about in this book, he really did sing everything. He's done country, he's done straight up pop, he's done almost metal, he's done yacht rock, he's done soul, R&B, blues. You know, I mean, I don't think he gets enough credit for that versatility. He's not a one-trick pony. He's not just a guy that screams, you know. He's one of the best rock screamers.
And he's a survivor, man. He's a work ethic.
Yeah.
All right. So here we go. The rapid fire section of the interview we finish out with here, because I did this with Martin Popoff for his Judas Priest book, and people really dug it. So here we go. Best Sammy Hagar solo album. I know the answer. Go ahead.
Lockbox.
3 Lockbox. Most underrated Sammy album.
Just because it's a latter day album, and you know, it's that whole thing about not being on a strong label, I'm going to say 1013.
Okay. Most overrated Sammy album.
I'm going to say VOA.
Yep. Best Sammy Hagar solo song.
Having said that, I'm going to say a song on VOA, Swept Away.
Swept Away. Most underrated Sammy song.
Wow. You know, it would kind of have to be something that's either really old or fairly more recent, because it's just enough.
Urban Gorilla, man. That's my new favorite from Sammy.
What's that?
Urban Gorilla.
Urban Gorilla is awesome. It's almost prog, but it's short. Like, a lot happens in a short amount of time in that song. I'm going to go Okay, I'm gonna go with Silver Lights from the first album.
Yeah, great. So that's like the pre-Love Walks In alien abduction story.
That's the space opera that never happened.
Yeah. Most overrated Sammy song.
Oh boy, getting into tough territory here.
Mas Tequila.
Maybe, yeah. That's only really half a Sammy Hagar song, anyways. Let's go with that. That's a safe choice.
Okay. If you were to introduce a new fan to Sammy Hagar's catalog, and this is like a young person, 19, 20, 21, which song would it be and why?
Well, it might be a cliche, but if they don't like I Can't Drive 55, they're not going to like anything else. You know what I mean? Like, there'd just be no point of going any further. That's one case where the person's most, like, it's like somebody's like, well, what does Rat sound like? I'd play them Round and Round. It's their biggest song, but that's what they sound like.
And it's a song it's got to be a song that they're going to want more.
Yeah,
and that's
I'd go with Can't Drive 55.
All right. All right. Red on Black, a listener's guide to Sammy Hagar. Out now, Amazon, all the usual places. And then people can find you online. Talk about the YouTube show that you've got.
Tim's Vinyl Confessions on YouTube. I've passed 10 years of doing this in September, and just going to keep on going. I'm in the midst, tied in with this book, of doing a deep dive series going through each of his solo albums. Eric guested on the very first 2 episodes. You can check.
I had the first 2 albums I had to talk about.
Yeah, no pressure. But yeah, we're going through the entire catalog, so that's going to take me into next year. But I've got videos every week. I've got 3 videos every week now: Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Instagram, Facebook, all Tim's Vinyl Confessions. You can find me there. And I am, I'm just going to keep doing the episodes, putting more content out. You're probably going to ask me, but I've got a couple of book projects on the go as we speak. But yeah.
What can you tell us? You can't say who it's about yet.
Let me say this. The next book I'm working on is another panel book, like my Y&T and my Kansas, where I've got other people's, I'm talking to other people in it. And then the other one I'm working on is like this, where it's all me writing it. So.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of who it might be. I can make some guesses, but I don't want to. I'm just.
You got to play it close to the vest yet. I'm not in promo mode.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Tim. Thanks for being on, and congrats on a book that's. I mean, long. It's a long time coming. I don't know how a book on Sammy has not been written on his solo catalog, his body of work, but finally you did it, and you did it justice.
Thank you. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you giving me and all other aspiring authors a chance to talk about their stuff on here, because I'm just, I'm self-published. This is not my source of income. This is just a really fun thing that I've kind of fallen into. Somehow in the last 3 years, I've now got 4 books. I don't know how that happened. But,
yeah, isn't that cool, man? That is so cool. You're like the Sammy Hagar of authors. You're working hard. You're plugging away, and
trying to do good work, man.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I really, this is like all my other books. I'd never found one like it, therefore I had to write it. I guess I'd never seen another one like it, so it's like, well, there should be a book like this.
Tim Durling, thanks, man.
Thank you.